uneasy. Oh, okay. So, as I said, the last 3 Sundays have these themes, what we usually call apocalyptic or eschatological. It's kind of unfortunate in a way. It always makes us think of the apocalypse or the end times as a really bad and violent time because of all this kind of accretions of interpretations. Oh, I guess I've been asked, what do I mean when I say accretions? Accretions is the piling on of different ways of thinking about the scriptures. So today, I'm actually not going to get into the weeds of this parable of the talent, but I'm going to treat the last 3 parables together that we will hear and have heard in the Gospel of Matthew. So last week we heard also a difficult parable, the parable of the 10 bridesmaids, where the 5 who didn't bring enough oil, they're like, too bad for you, you don't get to come in to the banquet. And today we have the parable of the talents, which is about some slave master asking his slaves to invest, and one of them doesn't, and he is thrown out, punished, cast into the outer darkness. And next week we have the last parable of this trilogy, and it's the sorting of the goats and the sheep. And those who didn't do what this king wanted done will be sent to eternal punishment. So, the vitriol in the Gospel of Matthew gets to a very high pitch at the end of this time. And I have to say, it is very good that we're uneasy when we hear how it's escalating in anger and violence. And it's, the lectionary, when we read it, often on a Sunday, you get to hear the good stuff. You get to hear the easy stuff. I mean, right before this was the woes to everybody. And we think of Matthew's Beatitudes, and whenever they make that little embroidered thing of Matthew with the Beatitudes, blessed, right? They always take Matthew's version because Luke's version has all the woes, but Matthew saves up all the woes for right now, and he's very angry. And his anger is something I want to examine. It's getting to this pitch that it makes me wonder, what do we do with someone who has such righteous anger and even good reason for their anger when it's getting it dances across this line of retribution, of punishment, of God's wrath? Is that something we need today when we look at the world? Do we need more wrath? Do we need more retribution? Do we need to see our enemies smashed? So I want to consider then what it means to have anger and what it means to cross that line as people of God, as we dance with our anger. So Matthew is angry because he and his community once belonged to the synagogue, and he had a problem with the religious elites in his synagogue who he believed did not practice justice, did not give out mercy. And he was especially mad because they were the ones he thought should be the ones who practiced justice and mercy. And I imagine, how sometimes when I make my announcement, I ask, are there any other announcements? And he'll get up and go, I have one, you're all gonna burn. Like, that's what he wants to say, you're all gonna burn. Because he is so mad at their complacency of, and not just their complacency, their participation in oppression. And he wants them to wake up from that complacency and do justice. And that was his big vision for the world, those Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor, blessed are the meek. And he, in this community, did not see the leaders, the group, doing that. And he got so mad. And that fire of indignation just was burning him up. So then what he does in his gospel, one of his favorite phrases in his gospel is, and they will be cast out into the outer darkness where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth, bind them up. So he clearly has some consequences he would like to happen to those with whom he thinks deserves it because they haven't been doing what is right. But is he right? Is he right to go there? Are we right when we feel righteous indignation to cross over to presenting consequences for our enemies that we think they deserve? Who is the architect of consequences? For there are consequences to not practicing justice, not giving out mercy. We do understand that. But who deals that out? And what is the imagination that is behind it? And from what I can see, when we think we're the architects of those consequences, we just hit them back. Hit them harder. Show them. Give them their comeuppance. So, as we come to this time where he's talking about the last days and the last things, he has this vision of a beatitude universe. But Matthew is kind of having a hard time with his anger. I have to say, that's me. Like, I want justice and peace to reign. But I know deep inside me, there's sometimes this anger that I can't, I have to watch it. I have to really watch it. Because the power of the anger, the ferocity, it takes me to hate faster than, and it's very hard to admit this. It's very hard to admit how quickly I can just go to that place where, but that's how it works when we don't take a good look at what we are actually like also inside. Also inside. Because if the world we want is a certain thing, that has to be true also for the inside. So when we're talking about these last days, and if you begin to hear more of this eschatological language, this last days language, we'll go into Advent, you'll hear more of it. Consider, besides the last things that need to be finished out in the world, like peace and justice, lifting up the oppressed, what are the last things that need to be revised in here? And the reason why I notice this thing with Matthew is because I notice it in myself. I have to wonder about my anger. And I have to pray for God for the gift and mercy of self-control. And when I am mad, it's okay to be mad, but it's not okay to cross that to judgment of other people in the way that you would want something to happen to them, some consequence that you can think of. And so I think in these last days, as we're considering what these last things are, I think one of the most important gifts to pray for is self-control, self-examination of our own last things. And leave those consequences that come up so quickly in our imagination. It'll come up. Just set them down and say, I am not merciful enough to come up with the consequences. But I leave all that to the God who is the only one who has enough mercy to judge us. Amen.